Healthcare and senior care is fraught with problems and challenges, but we're also seeing some amazing new clinical treatments and resources. This show will help illuminate and uncover the good, bad, and the ugly in order to equip patients, families, and other healthcare providers. Welcome to Senior Care Confidential.
Hey, Joe, how are you?
I'm doing good, Brian. How are you?
Good. I'm really excited about this subject. This is like a subject I've been studying for, when I think about it, actually probably closer to 15 years now. And it's interesting. And there's some newer research and data and some books that I want to share that are starting to solidify this even more, where I think this is like the future of like proactive healthcare, which, you know, that's kind of my thing. And I don't want to get old. And so I study all this anti-aging stuff. But before we get started on it, I wanted to paint a picture of a program that I started years ago in Central Florida. And this was back when I was doing sports medicine, because, you know, every young athletic male therapist wants to work in sports medicine. So that's what I did, right? And so I ran this clinic, and I got to work with a rheumatologist. And back then, you ever heard of fibromyalgia? Mm-hmm. Okay. Mm-hmm. So fibromyalgia. You
don't really hear much about it anymore.
No, it was wild because this show can go on forever. I'll try to keep it kind of brief. But back then, fibromyalgia was like the second most commonly misdiagnosed musculoskeletal disorder like in the world. And so unfortunately, because everyone just slaps a label of fibromyalgia on it, it becomes quickly one of those things that is, you know, spoken behind the closed doors of, oh, she thinks she has fibromyalgia, right? And so it's this bad thing. So, but it's legit, and you don't see it as oftenly diagnosed now. I think it's just got way too overused. Right. But back then, there were some clinicians, including myself, who actually believed it. I saw a number of patients with this, and for whatever reason, in this particular area of the world that I worked in, we had a bunch of them come through our clinic. And so I was determined to figure some things out on this thing because I'm open enough to kind of learn and trial things or whatever. And long story short, we created a really incredible fibromyalgia program that worked incredibly well. And I just didn't know what I was doing. I just tried stuff. It worked. I built on it more. It worked better. And then we just kind of created this whole thing. And so it's always been one of these things of, I wonder why that worked. Okay,
so briefly, the program, was it diet, exercise, vitamins? What was it?
All of it. And so I had it's the only clinic I've ever worked in that had this unique thing. We literally had a 9 foot by 9 foot by 9 foot deep. It was a cube pool, heated pool. And so you couldn't actually get in it. You had to be lifted into it. And so the wall was like here. So I would stand at the wall. And so for those people who've ever worked with patients with fibromyalgia, massage and like soft tissue work feels really good for them, for the vast majority of them. The problem is it doesn't last, and you'll never discharge them because they'll never become autonomous because you're just we're putting a Band-Aid over it. Mm-hmm. And so for a lot of us therapists, like, I'm never doing that again because I can never discharge these patients because they're always in pain. They're always, you know, and they just come for weeks and weeks and weeks. And so like, we have a few hard rules. Like, one is we don't do massage. We don't do soft tissue work on anybody with fibromyalgia. I have since bent that. But initially it's a bad idea because you need them to get to where they're independent and they can manage their own symptoms, and massage actually just delays all that. So we would put them in this pool. And a couple of things to know about fibromyalgia is it is closely associated with chronic fatigue syndrome, which means these people don't sleep. So when you sleep, there's cycles of sleep, and part of the cycles is you're recovering like emotionally and mentally from the day. The other part of the sleep is where you're recovering physically. Your body it stimulates production of more hormones being released, like testosterone and growth hormones, so you can recover physically. Well, if you interrupt that, if you don't get enough sleep, then I'm not recovering emotionally every day, and I'm not recovering physically. And so as time goes on, it makes the symptoms worse. So you're pain, you're frustrated. They're usually very depressed or have some anxiety component to it. So there's all these things, right? So they're, in a very friendly, lovingly way, I'm going to say this, they're a basket case from a bunch of different levels, right? Emotionally, mentally, physically. And I'm very empathetic to those folks because I got to work with them a lot. And so, but I wanted to make sure whatever we're going to do was going to work. And so knowing that they didn't sleep very well, I needed to get their bodies moving. Well, they don't tolerate land exercises because when you start getting them moving against even gravity, it triggers a lot of them to have higher levels of pain. And so I was like, I look over in the corner, like, I got this 9 foot by 9 foot by 9 foot pool. So we did pool exercises. And while I'm doing the pool exercises with them, very basic stuff. So they're floating. There's no weight. They're weightless, right? And while I'm talking with them, you're empathizing. They're
treading water.
They're treading water, but thank you. There's a vest. It sounds like we're drowning them. There's a vest in like kind of bungee cord thing. So they're actually floating. They're supported, right? So it's completely weightless. And we're taking them through just a kind of a full body, very light exercise program. And we scaled it up. Like, so you'd start with really easy and not very many minutes, right? And so then over time we would build that as you tolerated more. Well, the benefit of them being in the pool is everything's resisted. Even this is resisted in the pool. And so within about 10 or 15 minutes, I've already exhausted you. And so what happened is they'll go home that night with
sleep like a rock.
It's the first nap they've had that actually helped them. And so then we just kept building on that. And so eventually we would get to where we're doing like land exercises. Like they would graduate from being a fish to actually a land mammal. And so we started doing stuff on land and a whole bunch of other stuff that we got into. We got into sleep, we got into nutrition, we got into a whole bunch of other things that we worked with them on. But all that to say, like, I was kind of on this kick a long time ago because of that one patient population. And so now that I've gotten into my 40s and I'm studying a lot more of, man, I don't want to see any more gray hairs. So I'd really like to extend how long I can move like this. And so I study a lot of anti-aging stuff. And so there's a growing trend of research and of physicians actually leaving the traditional medical field, if you will, that's kind of largely driven by reactive care. It's largely driven by pharma, and that kind of stuff. And so they're starting to push back and go, hey, maybe there's some things that we've been missing all along. And so that's kind of the point of today's show. But there's a backstory. Like I've seen this thing, but I never knew how to quantify all this stuff. I just tried stuff and it worked. And I happened to hit on these key areas that they now know are directly involved with this thing we're going to talk about. And so the book that I just got a couple weeks ago, just released, is called, there we go. It's called Good Energy by Dr. Casey Means. It is, if you're a clinician or you have some biology background, you probably can handle the book okay. The first section of the book is a little, I love it because it's detailed, but there may be some terminology you might have to have
get a little lost
a dictionary next to you to kind of, or Google or whatever. Don't use Google, but Bing, whoever. So they're, anyway, so the book is fascinating because it talks about like her trajectory or her progress from, working as an ENT and seeing all these things that were all inflammation based, right? So as an ENT, you're seeing all this sinusitis and rhinitis and blah, blah, blah. Everything was an itis. And so she's like, there's something we're missing here because if all I'm doing is, cleaning out holes and the inflammation just keeps coming back, there's something else.
What's causing
all this stuff.
Right.
And so and I tend to agree because I've seen this happen before too, because another program that we started developing, actually because of my sister. So my sister had, and she won't mind me telling you this, but she had a really incredibly bad back for a few years. She was lifting kids and it destroyed her back. And so she's not as big as I am. And so lifting kids was hard for her. And so she was almost like bedbound for a while.
Wow.
And she's a PT as well. And she went through, I think it was the Mayo Clinic that had it. And it was this like 5 day, not 5 days, it was 5 days a week, but it was like a 30-day program where she stayed in a hotel across the street from Mayo in Florida. And every day she had a schedule. She would work, there would be group therapy classes, like mental therapy classes. She would meet with a physician who's a like pain management person or whatever. And then they would work with a physical therapist. And so they worked on breath work. They did a whole bunch of stuff. And at the conclusion of the 30 days, her pain was significantly better. She's now running marathons, by the way. This was like a couple years ago.
Wow.
And so I'm like, okay, so I got to learn more about this. Because again, now I'm going back 15 years to my fibromyalgia days. And I'm like, okay, that worked for that patient population. This is working for like chronic pain management. And so like, there's something here. So we, if you go into the weeds on like how to manage chronic pain like this, you'll see that there are some common themes. And one of them seems to be that, and I say seems to be, and let's do this. Evidence-based practices drives me crazy, because evidence-based practices means if something was proven 20 years ago that we're still relying on. And what I'd rather use is like a working theory. Here's our current working theory based on what we know has worked in the past. And that way, if we use the term working theory, then we can actually be open to being creative. So my current working theory, or our working theory on the pain management side of things was, once a patient or whoever, it doesn't matter, once somebody has some sort of a traumatic event, fracture, degenerative joint disease, whatever, over time, that stimulus, the signal that's communicating with the brain, that it almost like it's writing a new software program, so that even in the absence of the inflammation or the absence of the trauma, so the fracture is healed, but they still feel the pain, right? Or the surgery's been done, but they still feel the pain. Mm-hmm. There's something that's been written over, almost like a software program. And so we were thinking initially that myself, the doctors that treated my sister, because we talked about this at length, that there must be some sort of a software recoding that we're doing as we're doing things like breath work, and as we're doing things like working on nutrition, or certain types of exercises. By the way, did you know that if you do an isometric exercise, isometric is like you just push against something mm-hmm. like for 5 to 7 seconds. There's some parameters to this, but without going too much in the weeds on that, isometrics have a positive effect on pain. If you do isometrics, you can actually get the pain stimulus to drop. Wow. So there's a bunch of different stuff like that we know. That's and so. Great. Because we're stimulating the nervous system that way, we're all thinking, okay, well, we must be just rewriting the software program. Like the software program got written to say, hey, I want to feel chronic pain all the time, which has all these other negative effects to it. And maybe by us turning all these little dials, that we're just causing a rewriting of the software program. And then this book came out. And then this has sent me down a whole other rabbit trail of, holy smokes, there's actually a lot more doctors that are doing this. And so what they found is it might not be just that there's a software reprogramming. I still think there is a function of that, because it is directly impacting the nervous system. But what her contention and some of these other doctors, I should say contention, their working theory, which I tend to totally agree with now, and I think this is a start of a great revolution in medicine for adults, for kids, is that all of these issues that we deal with, so whether it be arthritis or sinusitis or rheumatoid arthritis or congestive heart failure, Alzheimer's, diabetes, all of these things stem from one problem. And because the way that our current healthcare system is set up right now, everything is driven into specialties, right? Because there's more money in specialties, and two, if you think about it, not from a holistic perspective, but from a narrowed perspective, I'll tell you, the guy who did surgery on my back is not a general orthopedist. I wanted the guy who does spine surgeries day in and day out, absolutely, not the guy who did the ankle, right, the surgery before, right? There is a value in having a specialist who this is what they focus on. This is their world, right? Mm-hmm. So I'm not trying to poo-poo that idea, because I completely agree, because I did it myself, where I saw it with this specialist. But if you look at it from a categorical standpoint or global perspective, if everybody's forced into specialties, then who's actually out here looking at the whole thing saying, right, hey, all these things you're dealing with might actually have a bigger root cause. So that's like the framework of this whole book. And so the idea behind it is the root cause is actually poor metabolism, from underpowered mitochondria. That's probably a big word. Some of us have learned that stuff in high school. Some of us, depending on how old you are, like my seniors that I talked to this about, like I've never heard of that term before. So what a mitochondria is a small organelle inside of every one of your cells. And we have 30, 40 trillion cells in our bodies. Each one of these cells has somewhere between 2 to, I've seen as many like 10,000 mitochondria per cell. These things are a huge number, right? What a mitochondria does is it converts food energy, like, what do they call that? There's a term, I'm losing anyway. Produces a potential energy. So food energy is like essentially potential energy, right? And it converts that through some processes that we all learned in school that, honestly, it's too much detail for me to even remember at this point, but it converts that into real energy. And so it powers the cells and the individual functions of those cells. Well, what happens if through limited sunlight, bad nutrition, bad exercise, no
poor
sleep,
diet,
all that stuff, if we're creating an issue where those mitochondria are now underpowered, well, if we go back to our understanding of how the body's designed, it's incredibly well designed to survive and to heal itself. It's awesome. And so if our body is getting a distress signal because the mitochondria going, I'm really weak and underpowered, I'm not getting all the stuff I need, it sends out a distress signal that says, please help. Well, the please help is inflammation. And when you're dealing with chronically inflamed, like systemic inflammation, it shows up in specific cells like kidney failure, congestive heart failure, diabetes, depression, arthritis, all of these things. And so they're seeing a link to all these things. What's amazing, and going back to the pain management stuff and the fibromyalgia stuff, my own personal experience with this is when you start fixing a lot of those things, like all these other things kind of go away. By the way, you know what the other name for Alzheimer's is? Diabetes type 3.
Wow.
Why? Because they're seeing that there's a link between blood sugars and Alzheimer's and dementia. So anyway, it's a phenomenal book in terms of understanding a different way to see like root causes with all those disease processes that we have. But I want to give them, there's like 5 things that she talks about. There's 5 biomarkers that she and some of these other doctors highly recommend. The one is you want a fasting glucose of at least below 100. Mm-hmm. She'll say that she quotes a bunch of different studies in this book. One of the studies says something like 92, I want to say it's 92%. We're going to say 9 out of 10. 9 out of 10 adults fail in multiples of these categories I'm about to tell you. Okay. So, fasting glucose of below 100, your waistline for females is less than 35 inches, for males less than 40 inches. Your high density lipoprotein, your HDL cholesterol essentially is less than 40 for men, less than 50 for women. Your triglycerides less than 150, and blood pressure is less than 130/85. So those are the 5 things. So you're looking at somebody who is metabolically fit. If they meet those criteria, they're probably in a good standing. If you're outside of those criteria in a couple or a few or all of them, then you are more than likely going to have a chronically inflamed system that's going to manifest in all these other things that you don't want to have happen. And so she goes through nutrition, because do you know how much, this is phenomenal. Do you know how many tons of food we eat?
No.
It's like 70 to 80 metric tons of food we eat in an entire lifetime.
Wow.
And they're saying nowadays, because of shelf life and grocery stores and funding from the USDA and all those things for bad foods, they're saying 70% of those foods that we're eating, of those 70 to 80 metric tons, are ultra processed foods. And the body doesn't know how to handle that stuff, right? It's getting dumped something like 300 to 7,000 times more the sucrose than it was ever than a generation ago.
Why are we not talking about it? I mean, don't you think that's an easy solution?
The problem is there's too much. And she mentions the same thing too. Remember when smoking was a big deal? The Surgeon General had all those warnings on there, right? It changed the smoking habits it took a little bit of time, but people stopped smoking, right?
They did stop smoking.
Okay. Or in mass they did. There's still some out there, but it changed
not
a lot.
Not like it was.
The doctors aren't smoking anymore, right? Or at least they're not on the Camel ads, saying, I smoke Camels, recommended by 8 out of 10 doctors. That stuff's not happening anymore, right? So this is if they came out and said, sugar is bad, by the way, high fructose corn syrup, which is, there's all of these subsidies to, the corn agriculture folks or whatever, like there's so much money that is creating just bad incentives and biases that's part of the problem. And so
I know, but you look at a box of Lucky Charms, it's $9 now.
I know.
And a canister of old-fashioned oats is $3.
The American Diabetes Association is allowing Coca-Cola to sponsor
Yeah, that's
come on.
crazy.
It's insanity. So that's part of the reason. And so there's so many things that are not allowing this to get out. I'm thankful for doctors like Casey Means and some other ones that are that are starting to talk about this stuff. But the amount of food that we're eating that's so bad. And you think about like the body. When you go have, I can eat an entire large pizza in one setting. I don't know, 4,000 calories, 5,000 calories. But if I have like a 12-ounce steak and a thing of broccoli, I am stuffed. Mm-hmm. It's because part of your body's design is my mitochondria are telling me I need more stuff. I need more nutrients, and I'm not getting the nutrients from the Pizza Hut pizza. And so you're not getting the hormonal signal of, hey, I'm getting full until much later. And so we're overeating all these things. And so if 70% of your, 70 tons of food in your lifetime is bad food, no wonder we're having all these chronic issues. Mm-hmm. So that's the book report, at least. And so, right. So those are the 5 markers that she talks about, the 5 biomarkers. And then the things that we do know, we've already talked about this kind of on the show, proper sleep. So there's sleep hygiene things. Like if you want to track it, get an Oura Ring, get a Whoop, get a Apple Watch. The problem with Apple Watches is you got to recharge them all the time. But sleep is incredibly important. Physical activity. And it's not just... Walking is probably the best thing you can do because it's what they call zone 2 exercise, which you guys can look that up. But it has a direct, a direct impact on mitochondria. So it does actually make your mitochondria stronger and more plentiful. So it actually grows more of them. So that's zone 2 exercise. That's walking. That's the easiest thing for most of us to do. But you also do need some resistance training too. There's some weights. Yep. There's some benefits of that kind of stuff. So sleep, exercise, obviously nutrition. We talked quite a bit about that. Avoid the inner parts of the grocery store. Eat everything on the outer part of the grocery store. Plenty of fruits, vegetables, and we won't get into the whole meat subject, but I prefer red meats, fish, and chicken. Other people don't like those kind of things. That's fine. Get your protein from someplace else. Just don't do it in the middle of the store. And she also talks about meditation and breathing and like breath work, because there is some research that does talk about whether you want to pray or whether you just want to do it through breath work. Doesn't matter to me. I do both, but there is an impact on your psychological health and your mental health when you spend time just to be still. Mm-hmm. Be still and know I'm God, mm-hmm. right? There's a reason why he said that, because mm-hmm. there is healthy value in doing that. And then she also talks about making sure you get outside for sunlight, vitamin D production, those kind of things. Mm-hmm. But yeah, so simple takeaways. It's a really thick book. It's awesome. I love it.
So how much sunlight per day?
Oh, we're going to go down a rabbit hole in this. So
I listened to that podcast.
I swear one of these days, I think
it's 2 hours.
We're going to do
2 hours a day.
I think we should start doing like a tinfoil hat segment where we just like crush conspiracy theories. Talk with your doctor, like your oncologist. If you have skin cancer issues, obviously there's an issue with this. I have a hard time believing that something as natural as the sun in short doses is bad for humans. But you'll hear that. And so they'll say, don't go outside unless you have,
Yeah, but I mean, I'm super fair, Irish descent, and my dad took us to the beach in Florida as children with baby oil. Yep. And so it's a wonder I don't have to have
alive.
Things.
Yes.
I'm still alive.
No gross on your face.
And I don't have to have things removed.
They say 20 minutes a day, a few times a week is ideal. But honestly, they have lamps now too. Like you can do a sunlight lamp. I still think it's better outside.
Just getting outside is so important.
Man, go outside and get a walk in, right? Now I got the exercise piece and I got the vitamin D piece. And if you're breathing through your nose and you're kind of working on some breath work, I can get that one done too. Like there's ways to kind of hack your time with this. Mm-hmm. But a fascinating book. It's a really interesting study. I'm so grateful to have read the book, and I follow a whole bunch of other doctors who are now on this kind of thing too. A lot of times you'll see like with the functional medicine doctors, they're looking at it more holistically. They're almost kind of like what the PCPs used to be. And this is not to knock primary care doctors, but they're so inundated with regulations and the billing piece and all this crap that it's hard to kind of zoom out and kind of help put all these pieces together. And so, a few of these people in functional medicine doctors are kind of getting into more of a holistic look. And it really seems like it's all boiling down to this little powerhouse in our cell called the mitochondria. And if you negatively impact it, it has negative effects on your body.
Love this. Brian, thank you so much. Can they get that book on Amazon?
Amazon, Barnes & Nobles, everywhere. And I'm not really here to promote the books. I'm making nothing off this, but I was so enamored by it. I heard her on a few podcasts. I was like, I bought it the second it came out. And I was like, oh my gosh, this starts to put more of the puzzle pieces together for me.
This is awesome. Thank you so much. Great information.
Thanks, Joe.
Have a great day.
Bye.